I have a lot of seeds and I have a lot of plants, but I don't have a lot of space in my garden. The solution is container gardening. Hi, I'm Gardener Scott, and I discuss everything gardening so that you can become a better gardener. Today, let's talk about the best plants for container gardening. Container gardening adds a great amount of versatility to a typical garden. You can grow in everything from a livestock tank to decorative pots to a cloth grow bag. And the great versatility in container selection also means you have great versatility in the plant selection. But when you have a container garden, you need to realize you can't grow every plant as well as you can in a raised bed or in open ground. And that's what I'll be discussing in this video. The best plants for containers that will do well, that will produce, that can actually give you a harvest. The first thing you need to consider when matching the plant with the container is the full size of the plant. You need to anticipate how big the plant is going to get and make sure that you give enough soil for the roots to fully develop. You won't be able to grow a 6 or 8 foot tall tomato plant in a 6-inch pot. And likewise, it might not be beneficial to waste the space of a 20-gallon container filled with thyme when you can get an ample amount of herbs when grown in a 6-inch container. Many of the plants that you can grow in a regular garden bed can be grown in a container. But let's start talking about some that really don't do well when confined in a small space. And those are primarily perennial vegetables. Plants like the asparagus that I have in this bed and the rhubarb that's behind me. These are the kind of plants that will come back year after year for decades. And they don't do well in a container for a few reasons. The soil within the container will eventually lose all of its nutrients. So container gardens require more regular fertilizer than a raised bed or open ground. Well, one of the reasons for that is because of the organic material that's in the soil. And so the soil level within containers will gradually sink. The volume will decrease. Well, that doesn't work well for plants like asparagus and rhubarb that need a steady soil structure for their roots to grow and expand and enable them to come back year after year. And containers just can't provide that steady source of nutrients that a lot of these perennial vegetables need. Also think about plants that require a permanent trellis, primarily fruits. They typically aren't best suited in containers. Container gardens have a great advantage in their versatility. You can move them wherever you want. Well, when you anchor them into one location and then build a permanent structure around it, like a grape trellis, it kind of defeats the purpose of using the container in the first place. Those type of plants are often best in the ground. Most of your other garden plants can be grown in containers, and some are ideally suited for containers, like this horseradish. It can become very invasive, but by growing it in a container that's completely enclosed, including the bottom, this isn't going to expand to any other area of my garden. I'd much rather grow horseradish in a container than attempt to grow it in a raised bed or open ground. This is my square foot garden bed, and everything in this bed can also be grown in containers. The concept behind square foot gardening is to break everything down into a square that's 12 inches on each side. Well, correlate that with a pot or a container. If you can grow a number of plants in 1 square foot, if you transfer that to a container, you can grow the same number of plants in a container of the appropriate size. If you practice square foot gardening, consider taking some of these plants like the radish and the kale and the beets and the parsnips and the peas and the lettuce and growing all of those in a container, just as you would in a square foot garden system. This is a green stock vertical gardening system, and it helps display not only the versatility in containers, but also the versatility in plant selection. This is just outside my kitchen door, and I've got lettuce, I've got mustard, I've got sage, I've got thyme, I've got peas. I have lots of plants growing in this system. These are all the kind of plants that you might use on a daily basis. So if you like salad crops that have easy access to your kitchen, consider putting in a container garden where you can just come out, pluck off the plants you need, and use them right away. Herbs or herbs are ideally suited for container gardens. I have 4 different size pots, and I'll be growing 4 different types of herbs. In this biggest pot, I've got chives because they can actually grow into a pretty good sized plant with an extensive root system, and they'll come back every year. I'll have sage, I'll have thyme, I'll have tarragon. Those are also plants that can come back every year, and that's one of the advantages to growing the herbs in containers. If you offer them a little bit extra winter protection, you can expect them to return. Plants like rosemary, I can't grow them outside. My winters are just too harsh. But if I put a rosemary in a nice big pot, and then in the winter, put it in my shed or my garage along with the rest of these pots, all I have to do is bring them out next spring, and I don't even have to plant again. They're all ready to go. I'm growing a lot of garlic, and this bed is filled with it. But if you don't need to grow 100 bulbs, you could easily grow a few in a container. Garlic is ideally suited for container gardening. I have peas growing in this bed right next to the spinach, and I also have some Napa cabbage and some beets in this bed. All grow great in containers. For vining plants that are small, like the peas, you may only need a few bamboo sticks to act as a trellis to help them grow, and then they're ready to harvest. Most root crops can do very well in a container. You just need to make sure you give them ample room for the roots to grow, and then sit back and wait for your harvest. There are many gardeners who grow carrots in 5-gallon buckets. Spaced 2 inches apart, you can have dozens of carrots in a single bucket, and they all come ready to harvest at the same time. So all you have to do is just tip it over and pull all the carrots out, and you'll have pounds of carrots in a single harvest. Buckets are also good for Swiss chard. I have Swiss chard growing in this bed, but you put one of those plants in a bucket, let it get big and bushy, put it outside your kitchen door, and it's ready to harvest anytime you want. Another plant that is commonly grown in containers, potatoes. The plant will grow very well, but especially in a big grow bag like this, the harvest is extremely easy. Like the carrots, you just tip the bag and they roll out ready to eat. I prefer to grow potatoes in a container. A good plant that is commonly planted in containers is strawberries. In fact, they'll sell pots like this, often called a strawberry pot. Now you could put herbs around it, or you could fill it with strawberries. And because strawberries will give you a couple years of harvest, consider this a semi-permanent planting. You have your strawberries, again, in an easily accessible area. If you have a harsh winter, you just take it indoors and you're assured that you'll have strawberries the next spring. The vegetable garden plants that are killed by the cold weather of winter are often ideally suited for containers. It's the plants like cucumbers and peppers and summer squash and tomatoes. They can all be grown in something like these grow bags. These are 10-gallon bags, these are 20-gallon bags, and they'll grow all of those plants. I like to trellis my tomatoes and have them grow vertically and tall, but that's not necessary in a container garden. If you have your pots with some space around them, then just let the cucumbers sprawl across the ground, or let the tomatoes just spread out. And then at the end of the season, when those plants are killed by that first frost, the grow bags are really easy to move into storage over winter. Another plant that doesn't do well in containers is corn. You need a big block of corn when you grow it because it's wind pollinated. And so growing in small pots in a small space really doesn't make a lot of sense. It's better to have a big group of corn in big open ground. And if you grow grains like barley or wheat, don't even waste your time with containers. Go ahead and grow them in open ground as well. The general categories of herbs, salad crops, root crops, and summer vegetables are pretty much suitable for container gardening. Some will do better than others. Anticipate the growth of the plant and their roots. You saw those extra tomatoes that I had in front of me at the beginning of this video? Well, they're going in some of these grow bags because I just don't have enough room in my raised beds and in open ground. It gives you flexibility when it comes to planting. If you've run out of space, or if you're just starting and you don't have much space, consider container gardening. And this is just one video in the container gardening series. If you want to see some of the videos that you might have missed, go ahead and click on one of these videos. I'm Gardener Scott. Enjoy gardening.